I have this very specific mental image when I think of the quote-unquote perfect gardener. You probably have it too. It's usually an older person, very calm, maybe wearing a sun hat, moving slowly through the vegetable patch with a watering
Oh
can.
yeah, the Zen master of the soil.
Exactly. And everything in their garden is geometric, perfectly straight rows, little plastic labels next to every single sprout.
Probably written in beautiful calligraphy too.
Right, and there's a graph paper layout in the shed with color-coded zones. It's just this vision of absolute order and control.
It is a really comforting image. But I think we tend to conflate expertise with organization. We just assume that if someone is truly good at something, they must be rigid and meticulous about it.
Yeah, we really do. But today's deep dive is going to take that image, crumble it up like dry soil, and just throw it in the compost bin. Because we are looking at a source today that suggests the secret to high yield efficiency isn't order at all. It's actually a very specific kind of chaos.
Controlled chaos is probably the best way to put it. It's about understanding a system well enough to just let it be messy.
And we are digging into a fascinating corner of the internet today to explore this. The site is qianmeng.org, and the specific article we're unpacking is titled Notes on Gardening Part 812. Subtitle is My Adjusted Process in Seed Germination. And this was published really recently on February 19th, 2026.
And right off the bat, that title should trigger a double take.
Part 812.
Part 812, yes.
I mean, we are going to talk about the sheer volume of this guy's work later because it is honestly mind-blowing. But first, we really have to talk about the author. His name is Eng, and he doesn't call himself a master gardener. He describes himself right at the top of the page as an old software plumber.
Which is such a distinctive way to introduce yourself. It immediately reframes the entire conversation we're about to have.
It really sets the tone. He talks about spending his nights tinkering with free Libra and open source software. So we're dealing with a guy who spends his life deep in the digital weeds, debugging code, fixing logic errors, optimizing systems, looking for memory leaks.
Right. And that is the exact lens through which he views his garden. And I think that's why this deep dive is so interesting. Because usually when we read gardening advice, it's from a biologist or a seasoned farmer. But Ang looks at a tray of seedlings, and he doesn't just see plants. He sees a code base.
And clearly he saw a code base that was pretty buggy.
Precisely. He saw a system that was inefficient, prone to errors, and consuming way too much processing power, meaning his time. So in this post, he describes a refactoring of his entire planting process.
Refactoring is the perfect word. For those listening who aren't in tech, refactoring basically means rewriting the code to make it cleaner and more efficient without changing what it actually outputs. So our mission today is to unpack this specific change he made. It sounds simple on the surface. He changed how he put seeds in dirt. But the philosophy behind it, it's actually a radical lesson in project management and efficiency.
It completely challenges the way we think about starting any project, really, whether it's a garden or a business or writing a book.
So let's set the context before we get into the dirt. We mentioned part 812. I want to hover on that for a minute because it explains why we should even be listening to this guy.
Right. It creates authority through sheer data volume.
Yeah, if I check the sidebar of his blog, which I did because I frankly couldn't believe the number, it's not just gardening.
No, it is a sprawling archive of a polymath.
Mm-hmm.
It's like wandering into the workshop of a mad scientist who is interested in absolutely everything.
He has notes on fish keeping. That's somewhere in the 200s. Notes on Haskell programming, part 62. Notes on photography, part 229. He's even got notes on dieting and playing the guitar.
It creates this picture of someone who learns by doing, and more importantly, learns by documenting.
And look at the frequency. The source data shows that in February 2026 alone, and remember the source was captured around the 19th or 20th, he had already published 57 posts.
Wait, let's do the math on that. 57 posts in less than 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's roughly 3 posts a day. Every single day.
Wow. So when we talk about his adjusted process in the garden, we aren't talking about a casual weekend hobbyist who decided to try something new once because he was feeling lazy. We are talking about someone who's running massive amounts of experiments.
Exactly. This is the tinkerer's mindset at an industrial scale. A software plumber looks for bottlenecks. If you are doing something 800 times, even a tiny friction point becomes unbearable. You really notice the lag.
That is a great point. If I plant seeds once a year, I don't care if it takes an hour to fiddle with little tags. It's a fun ritual. But if I do it every day, that hour is a massive bug in the system.
And Aang found a massive bottleneck. in the standard way of doing things.
So let's talk about that bottleneck. What was the before state? How was our software plumber planting his seeds before this big epiphany?
Well, according to the Post, he was following the rules. He writes that his previous method was to meticulously sow seeds individually into seedling trays.
Okay, describe that for the non-gardeners listening.
Yeah.
Or, for me, the bad gardener who kills absolutely everything.
Sure. It's the grid method. You get a plastic tray with maybe 50 little individual cells, kind of like an egg carton but smaller. You poke a hole in the center of one with a pencil, you drop one seed in, you cover it, you write a little white plastic tag that says tomato February 19th and stick it in. Then you move to the next cell.
Right.
Repeat 50 times.
It feels very correct, doesn't it? It feels organized. You look at that tray and you think, I have accomplished something. I have 50 tomato plants.
It feels controlled. In project management terms, we'd call this the waterfall method. Step 1 leads to step 2. Everything is planned and allocated before you even see a single sprout.
But he stopped doing it. He scrapped the whole system. Why?
The source is very explicit here. He says he chose to bypass that step due to unpredictable germination rates.
Ugh. The unpredictable variable.
I feel that in my soul, honestly. There's nothing more annoying than spending an hour perfectly spacing out these seeds, making the little labels, getting your hopes up, and then 2 weeks later you just have a tray of damp dirt. Nothing comes up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate friction point. In software terms, the input, your meticulous labor, was not correlating with the output, the yield.
You're building expensive condos for tenants that might not even show up.
That's a fantastic analogy. If you spend 5 minutes planting a seed that has a 50% chance of failing, you've wasted 2.5 minutes on average. When you scale that up to the volume Aang is operating at, hundreds of plants, daily posts, that inefficiency is a killer. It's wasted compute cycles.
So, nature is buggy. The code isn't compiling reliably. And you can't fix the seed. You can't debug the DNA of a plant in your garage.
The unpredictability is a hard constraint of the system. You cannot force a seed to sprout. So instead of trying to force order onto a chaotic system, Aang changed his behavior to match the chaos.
So what is the after state? What does the software plumber do now?
He says, I now simply scatter them across any available space I can find in my trays or container.
He just throws them.
Essentially, yes. The broadcasting method. He's utilizing available surface area without regard for individual cell separation. If there's a patch of dirt, he throws seeds on it.
That feels so reckless. It's anarchy.
It seems that way to the perfectionist. But listen to his rationale. He argues that since the seedlings eventually need to be transplanted anyway, the initial spacing doesn't matter as much.
Oh, that's the key unlock, isn't it? He's saying, why am I organizing them now when I have to move them later?
Precisely. He is deferring the sorting process. In the meticulous method, you are sorting the seeds before you know if they are alive. You are assigning resources. Individual cells tags time to potential failures.
Right. You're trying to optimize the queue before the requests even come in.
By scattering, he waits to see what germinates. Then, once they are growing and viable, that is, when he deals with them, he calls it a much more practical use of time and space.
It's surprisingly agile.
It is pure agile development.
Instead of a rigid plan, he's just going with the flow of what actually grows. He shifted from optimizing for order to optimizing for yield.
And speed. He can probably scatter 50 seeds in the time it took him to meticulously sow 3.
And there's a big but here. I'm listening to this, and my type A brain is absolutely screaming. I cannot be the only one.
I can hear the collective gasp of the organizers in our audience right now.
The source mentions the catch. And for me, this catch sounds like an absolute nightmare. He admits, quote, without proper tagging or labeling, it can be difficult to identify exactly what has germinated.
Yes. This is the metadata problem.
The metadata problem. If you scatter seeds randomly, you lose the index. You don't know if that sprout in the corner is a prize-winning tomato, a spicy chili, or a weed that just blew in from the yard.
Exactly. If you were just throwing seeds into any available space, as he says, you could have a mix of 3 different species in one tray. It becomes a total mystery box.
How on earth does he manage that? If I did that, I'd end up nurturing a dandelion for 3 months thinking it was arugula. I'd be watering a weed lovingly every single morning.
This is where we get into the difference between a novice like us and a master. Or, in this case, a software plumber with 812 commits to the repository.
Okay, break it down. How does he know what he's looking at without the plastic tag?
He relies on 2 things. First, simply experience. But more specifically, he points to visual recognition. He looks at the distinct shapes of the first leaves to identify the species.
The first leaves. Now, I remember from biology class that the first leaves, the cotyledons, often look totally different from the real leaves that come later.
That is correct. And that is exactly why this is such a high-level skill.
Explain that distinction for people who haven't touched a biology textbook in 20 years. Why is this hard?
So when a seed first sprouts, it pushes up these little starter leaves. They're called cotyledons. They're basically the solar panels packed inside the seed just to get the plant started. They exist solely to gather enough energy to grow the true leaves.
Right, they're the battery pack.
The problem is, for entire families of plants, the cotyledons look almost identical. For example, the cotyledons of a tomato, a pepper, and an eggplant, which are all in the nightshade family, look incredibly similar. They are just little green lance shapes. To the untrained eye, they are clones.
So distinguishing a chili pepper sprout from a tomato sprout at the two-leaf stage, that's not easy.
It's extremely difficult. It requires an incredibly subtle eye. He's looking at things like the thickness of the stem, a slight purple hue on the underside, maybe the angle of the leaf relative to the light.
It's like trying to identify a song from the first half second of the intro, or recognizing a specific coding language just by looking at the syntax highlighting colors.
Or reading code and understanding the function without any comments or documentation. He's internalized the documentation.
That's the trade-off. He traded external documentation, the tags, for internal knowledge.
Exactly. He doesn't need the plastic label because the label is in his head.
And this connects back to the sheer volume of his work, doesn't it?
It does. If you have written 812 posts about gardening, if you were in the garden every single day, you have built up a mental database that a casual gardener simply does not have.
So the scattering method isn't for everyone.
No, I want to be extremely clear about that. If a beginner tried this scattering random seeds into a pot without labels, it would be a disaster. They would pull up the flowers and water the weeds. This efficiency hack is only possible because of his deep domain expertise.
It's like a chef who doesn't measure ingredients. They aren't being sloppy, they just know the weight of the salt by the feel of it in their hand.
Precisely. If I tried to cook without measuring, it would be inedible. But when a master does it, it's efficiency.
I want to zoom out a bit here because we touched on the volume of his posting, but I think looking at the archive section of the source gives us a really cool picture of how this guy learns.
It is quite a unique ecosystem he has built. It's almost a digital garden itself.
We mentioned he posted 57 times in February 2026 alone. But let's look at the variety again. In the list of recent posts, we see titles like Notes on Fish Keeping Part 200 Retrospective and Notes on Haskell Embracing.
And Notes on Photography, Part 229, Tiny Glimpses.
It's all very reflective, isn't it?
It is. And if you look at the disclaimer on his site, he says, opinions expressed here are my own. I cannot guarantee the accuracy. He literally calls it a journal of an old software plumber.
So he's not writing a textbook, he's logging his life.
He is logging his learning process. This is what we call working out loud. By documenting every single step, 812 steps in gardening alone, he forces himself to observe closely.
That's a great point. Maybe the reason he can recognize those first leaves is because he's been photographing and writing about them for years?
I would argue that is exactly it. Writing is a form of seeing. You can't write a blog post about a specific plant 800 times without starting to notice the tiniest details. The documentation fuels the expertise, and the expertise enables the efficiency.
It's a feedback loop. He writes, he notices, he learns, he optimizes.
And he's doing it across disciplines. He is applying that same loop to Haskell programming and fish keeping. I suspect, though, the source doesn't explicitly say this, that his ability to spot patterns in code helps him spot patterns in leaves and vice versa.
The cross-pollination of ideas. Pun fully intended.
Very good.
Yeah.
But yes, when he says in the post, it's not that I no longer enjoy the process of individual sowing. He is showing that he is pragmatic. He isn't romantic about the old way. He is romantic about the result.
Which is such a coder mindset. I don't care how elegant the code looks if it doesn't run.
Exactly. The individual sowing was beautiful code that didn't compile. The scattering is messy code that works perfectly.
It's really liberating to hear that, because I think a lot of us get stuck in the proper way of doing things. We think if we aren't following the textbook step by step, we're failing. But here's a guy with 800 blog posts of experience saying, nah, just throw the seeds in the dirt. It's fine.
But again, with the caveat, just throw them in the dirt and pay attention.
Right. Don't check out. Tune in.
The scattering method demands more attention, not less. You have to look at every sprout and make a decision. Is this a keeper? Is this a weed? It forces active engagement with the garden.
Whereas the label method allows you to be passive. You just read the tag, oh, this says tomato, so I will water it.
Even if the plant inside is actually a weed that grew there by accident.
Oh, true. I've definitely watered a weed for a month because it was next to a label that said zucchini. I felt so betrayed when it flowered, and it was just some prickly thistle.
The label gave you a false sense of security. It made you lazy. Eng's method removes that safety net. It forces you to look at the reality of the plant, not the promise of the label.
That is deep. Dealing with reality versus dealing with the label, I feel like there's a bigger lesson there.
It is the essence of his philosophy. It's about direct contact with the subject matter.
I also want to mention just how consistent this guy is. Looking at the archive data, in the source it lists 730 posts in 2025, 732 posts in 2024, 730 posts in 2023.
He is posting essentially twice a day, every day, for years.
That is distinct dedication. It suggests that this adjusted process isn't just a whim, it's a deliberate decision born out of thousands of hours of labor.
And it suggests that his garden isn't just the plants. His blog is a garden. He is scattering thought seeds of ideas every single day. Some of them grow into big projects, some probably don't. But he keeps scattering.
Oh, I like that. The blog post itself is a broadcast seed.
Precisely. He throws the idea out there. If it resonates with the reader or if it grows into a bigger theory, great. If not, he moves on to the next post. He isn't trying to write the perfect great American novel every time he sits down. He's just scattering seeds.
He's not doing the waterfall method of blogging where you edit a post for 3 weeks before hitting publish.
No. He's agile blogging.
Yeah.
Publish, iterate, publish, iterate.
So let's bring this all together. We started with a counterintuitive idea that chaos in the garden might actually be more efficient than order.
We learned that Eng, the software plumber, moved from meticulous individual sowing to broadcasting seeds to deal with unpredictable germination.
He optimized for yield and time, accepting the trade-off that he loses his metadata, the labels.
But he mitigates that risk with deep internalized expertise, allowing him to recognize the first leaves without needing a tag.
And we saw that this expertise is built on a massive foundation of consistent documentation, hundreds and hundreds of posts across multiple disciplines.
A true testament to the value of being a tinkerer.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? You might not be growing tomatoes or writing Haskell code, but I bet there is somewhere in your life where you are obsessing over the proper way to start.
We all have areas where we are meticulously tagging empty pots.
Exactly. Maybe you're planning a project at work and you're spending weeks on the Gantt chart before you've even done a single task. Maybe you're trying to write a book and you're outlining every chapter before writing a single sentence.
Or you are organizing your email folders perfectly, creating rules and filters but never actually answering the emails. You have the cleanest inbox structure in the world, but zero communication happening.
Oof, too real. The lesson from Eng is sometimes you just need to scatter the seeds. Put the ideas out there. Write the rough drafts. Throw the tasks into the backlog without tagging them perfectly.
Trust that you will be able to recognize the good ideas when they sprout. Trust your own judgment to filter the signal from the noise later, rather than trying to pre-filter everything before it even exists.
Or factor later. Get the seedlings first. If you don't have sprouts, you don't have anything to organize.
Identify the first leaves of success and transplant those. Ignore the rest.
It's a brave way to work. It requires trusting yourself. It requires looking at the cotyledons of your ideas, those ugly early drafts, and knowing which ones have potential.
And that only comes with practice.
But looking at Eng's garden and his blog, it clearly yields results. He's got the produce to prove it.
Indeed he does.
So here is my final thought for you to chew on today. Eng relies on the distinct shapes of the first leaves to make sense of his chaotic planting. In your work or your hobbies, do you know what the first leaves of success look like?
That really is the core question.
Can you spot a good idea when it's just a tiny sprout? Or do you need a label on it to tell you it's good? Because if you can learn to spot the first leaves, you can stop worrying so much about the planting and just let things grow.
And that is where the real efficiency lies.
Thanks for joining this deep dive with us. Go scatter some seeds today. We'll see you next time.